Okay, today we're going to talk about Unit 6, which is consumer skills, and we're going to get into some of our major expenditures. And our two major expenditures are going to be housing and transportation. We will also talk about insurance this unit and possibly a little bit about identity theft if we have time in the semester. For this note guide, we are going to focus mainly on the housing, and then in a different video presentation, we will get to the second half of the note guide, which is the transportation piece. So transportation and housing are two of our biggest expenditures, and we can see from this pie chart that those two categories on our budget are going to make up 50% of the average spending for an average U.S. citizen. So here we have the same type of budget that we talked about in Unit 2, and this is where those costs are going to come in. Our three of our biggest are going to be housing, transportation, food. If we can include food in that, we get above the 60%. I think it's 63% of our budget goes to those three categories. And so we only have 37% left for everything else, which means that these two are incredibly important since half of our pay is going to pay for those two main expenditures. And again, like I said, throughout this entire semester, we are always going to think about our future self because that is our present self is going to impact our future. So we are going to plan everything that we want to buy. We want to think about how credit is going to impact our housing and our transportation choices. We're going to think about how our choices impact our net worth, and we're going to try and make choices that impact financial well-being. We want to be in a good financial position moving forward. We don't want anything that we do to negatively impact our future financial self. So like I said, we're going to start off with housing, and for our class, we're going to focus on renting versus owning. Those are our two main ways that we can have housing. And so housing, of that 50%, housing is 33% of that. And the way that we break that down is almost 20% of that 33 is going to be your housing payment. Almost 8% is going to be focused on utilities. 3% is going to be things like furniture. And then 3% is going to be about household operations. So that's what makes up the 33%, with just about 1% being household supplies, like cleaning supplies, things like that. So our biggest portion of this is going to be paying for the apartment, the house, the townhouse, the condo that we choose to live in. So as we go through this, try and think about your dream house and if you'd be able to achieve that. So housing is the largest expense for most people, and the prices are going to change dramatically. Even in the Kansas City area, we can see how prices change dramatically from one location to the next, and there are three factors that change the price of any type of housing, and that's going to be the size. A lot of times when we're thinking about housing, we see this as square footage. So how much square footage am I getting in this house or in this apartment? The location. How close am I to some of the hot spots that people want to be? How close am I to restaurants, to shopping centers? Am I in a city that has a really good school district? If it has a good school district, a lot of times it might be a little bit more expensive. And then what amenities might come with this? Am I renting an apartment that has a pool, that has a gym, that has a business center that I can go to get help and that I could work in? So what kind of perks are they offering me? The amenities are just going to be perks for this housing location. So if we're going to focus on renting first, some of the basics that we need to know. Initially, if we are renting, that means that we have a landlord. And a landlord is going to be the person who owns that piece of property, and then they are choosing to allow you to live there. They're choosing to rent it out as a way to earn profit, and they're choosing to let you be the person that rents that. So they are the one that is in charge. Every month, you are going to pay them rent. So you're going to pay the landlord a certain agreed upon price in order for living in their location. And then you become the tenant. So you are the person who is renting that property, who is living in that property. So you are the tenant. The three big terms for renters are tenant, means that you are the person renting. Rent is the price you pay to live there. And landlord is the person in charge, the person who actually owns this location. So if we are renting and we're trying to put together our budget or our spending plan, we are going to have a couple sections under our housing costs that we might identify. So we are going to want to identify utilities. Depending on where you choose to live, sometimes you might have some utilities included in your rent cost. You might have all of your utilities included in your rent cost, or you might have none of your utilities included in your rent cost. And that is a really big question to ask before you sign a rental agreement, because if you are paying $1,000 a month and then you have to pay your utilities on top of that $1,000, your monthly income might disappear really, really quickly just from your living expenses. Another section might be household furnishings. So what kind of furniture do you need for your bed or for your home? Do you need a bed? Do you need a comforter, sheets, towels, anything you need, pots and pans, cooking utensils, dishes, glasses? It adds up really, really quickly if you have to buy all of your household furnishings brand new. If you don't have anything to take from where you're living currently to a rental facility, it can be really expensive to collect all of those things. Communications, are you going to pay for internet? Are you going to pay for cable? Are you going to have to pay for a cell phone or a landline phone? A lot of times people will bundle this communications in with their utilities. And then lastly, we have renter's insurance. Almost every place that you will rent will probably require you to have renter's insurance. And renter's insurance is just going to be a way that you can cover any damaged or lost or ruined items if there is an accident. Maybe your apartment floods or there's a fire. By paying a small amount of renter's insurance, you are going to be able to replace those items at no cost to you or little cost to you. And all four of these are in addition to your rent payment. So we have a wide variety of places that you could rent. You might be able to find places online. A lot of complexes are going to be managed by a property management company. So there might be one really large organization who has 6 or 7 different apartment complexes that they will manage. You might know people, family, or friends who have rental facilities. You might see it on bulletin boards. You might see it in the newspaper. Ton of places, social media. You could find places to live on a variety of places. I know that Facebook Marketplace, there's always ads about people wanting to rent out an extra house that they have or an apartment that they have. When we do find a place that we would be interested in renting, we do have to compare those. That way we have our options and we can figure out what the best choice is for us. So initially, it is recommended that you're going to make a list of the things you're looking for in a rental property. So what is the list of things that you have to have? What is a list of things that you would like to have? You want to try and visit as many properties as possible. So at least a couple, that way you can have choices. There are going to be situations in your life where you may not be able to compare. Maybe you have to move out of your current location really quickly, and so there's only one option available, and that's unfortunate, but it does happen occasionally. But if you can find multiple places to rent that have some things that you are looking for, then you are in a better position to choose what the best option is for you. Make sure that you, before you even go visit this rental property, make sure that you can actually afford it and that you've practiced calculating the costs to ensure that you could pay your rent and your utilities every single month. And then know what the policies are before you sign any rental agreement. So some questions that you might want to ask when you are comparing these rental properties, a lot of those are going to be based on the direct cost. So you want to think about the rent and the length of your rental time. So how much is my monthly rent? When do I have to have that paid by? Is there any grace period? So if my rent is due on the 1st, but I pay on the 3rd, will I be charged a late fee? And then how long is this rental contract? Am I renting this apartment for 6 months, for a year, for 18 months? I just need to know, that way you can keep all of your documents in order. You're going to want to ask about the utilities. So who is responsible for the utilities? Are any utilities included in my rent? And then ask about the amenities. Is this a furnished apartment? Does it come with all of my furniture? What are the amenities that are offered? Do I need to have my own washer and dryer, or do you have some that are provided to me? Are there any additional charges for using the pool, for using the gym? Because sometimes that does happen. You want to ask about the policies. So what are the restrictions? A lot of times there might be pet policies. So I can't have a dog that is a certain breed, or I can't have a dog that is above a certain weight. Maybe there's restrictions on where I can park. Are there any safety features like floodlights, like extra locks on doors to make sure that nobody's able to break into your apartment? Who's responsible for any of the repairs and maintenance in this rental facility? What are the reasons that could cause somebody to get evicted? And if you are evicted, that means that you are kicked out of your rental property. And then just knowing what your rights are in this contract, who to contact if there is a problem. Once you've asked those direct questions, you're going to have to fill out a rental application to actually be approved. And so some things that are going to be asked on that rental application are going to be things like who will be living at the property. Is it you? Is it you and a roommate? Is it an entire family? You have to identify who the primary residence will be. If you have a guest, that's fine. But a lot of times if you have a guest that's there for an extended length of time, you might have to add them to the rental agreement. They're going to check in on your income. They're going to verify your employment to make sure that you actually can afford to live in this location. They'll look at any past renting history that you've had. They'll look at some of your references. A lot of times you have to give references. So that might be a family friend. That might be a boss. That might be a teacher. And then they're going to do a credit history check. So like we said in the credit unit, just because you're not applying for a new type of credit, renting an apartment is not a type of credit. They're still going to check your credit history and look to see how have you borrowed in the past and how trustworthy are you that you will make this rent payment every single month. Now that you have applied and you have visited, you've narrowed down your options, you can get into the rental agreement. So your rental agreement is what we usually just call a lease. And a lease is a legally binding contract. And this contract is going to specify all of the legal responsibilities that are both placed on the tenant or the renter, as well as the landlord who owns the rental facility. So it's going to outline every single detail that is legally upholding for your rental agreement. So before you sign any rental agreement, you truly want to read through it and make sure that all expenses, all policies, all restrictions are clearly outlined, that you understand everything that's happening in the contract, and then you ask questions if you don't understand, because this, again, like I said, this is legally binding. If you break one of these contract rules, your landlord could take you to court, and you sign the document saying that you would uphold all of your responsibilities. So if you don't, you could be in legal trouble. One thing to note is that a lot of times they're going to ask for a deposit for a apartment or a townhouse or any rental property. Do not make any payments without signing a rental agreement, because if you have not signed a rental agreement but you have given them money, they could legally just keep your money and rent your apartment out to somebody else instead. So do not pay anything until you have signed a contract. Alrighty, so what are those initial expenses that we were just talking about, like the deposits? So a lot of times you're going to have to pay a security deposit, and the security deposit is going to be money up front that you pay at the beginning in order to cover some repairs from normal wear and tear that might happen on the apartment. So they're probably going to have to clean the carpets. They're probably going to have to repaint the walls after you move out. They're going to deep clean everything so that it's ready for the next renter. So your security deposit will pay for that. If you keep your rental property in good condition and there are no major repairs, you will probably get a portion of your security deposit back. You will not get the entire thing, but you'll probably get a chunk of it. Additionally, some renters require a prepayment. So they might ask you to pay your first and your last month's rent up front as a sign of goodwill, showing them that I am ready to move in, and I am showing you that I'm ready to move in by giving you this large chunk of money. The opposite side of renting is going to be the option to own. And whenever we own, this is the process of purchasing a home. When you are ready to buy a house, you start off by contacting a real estate agent. A real estate agent is just going to be a business professional who is licensed and trained in representing a buyer or a seller if you're selling a home, to take care of those transactions for you. And so the benefit of getting a real estate agent is that they're going to help you find properties that meet your wants, meet your needs, are within your budget. They're going to help you calculate how much your budget really is, on how much you could afford to pay for a home. They're going to try and, like I said, help you find a property that fits your budget. And then they're going to work through all of that contract and closing process for you. They're going to be doing a big chunk of the paperwork. So if you don't go through a real estate agent, you might get kind of a headache trying to go through this process by yourself, because it can be very confusing to try and buy or sell a home on your own. But a real estate agent is very skilled in this, so they have the ability to take over some of that control for you. That way it is a little bit easier. So we talked about in our credit unit that a mortgage is a type of loan that we can get to purchase a home. So most people, almost everybody, is going to use a mortgage to buy their home or to get a loan, because very few people have hundreds of thousands of dollars saved up in their bank account, so they can't pay cash for a home. So going through that real estate agent and getting a lender is going to determine how much you can actually borrow on that credit for a home. So that'll determine how much you can afford to pay for your home. And the way that they're going to calculate how much you can afford to borrow is going to be looking at, again, at your credit history, because a home loan is a kind of credit. They're going to look at your current income. They're going to look at your net worth. So how much do I have in savings? How much have I invested? And they're going to look at some of those financial statements. They're going to look at your budget. They'll look at your income and expense statement to see how am I usually spending my money and how am I usually saving my money, how much money is usually coming in. So some significant expenses that are going to come along whenever you purchase a home initially is going to be that down payment. And so a down payment is just a portion of the purchase price that you are choosing not to borrow. This is going to be sometimes a very small amount of the purchase price, but it can be as large as you'd like it to be. So if I have money saved up, if I'm trying to buy a house that is $100,000 and I have $10,000 saved up already, then I have a down payment that's kind of somewhere in the middle. Additionally, I could pay for mortgage insurance, and mortgage insurance is just going to protect the company who is lending me the money if I have less than 20% as a down payment. So if you aren't meeting that 20% down payment number, maybe I only have 7% or 12%, then I'm probably going to be expected to pay for mortgage insurance just as a safeguard for the bank or for the lender who is offering me the loan. So in addition to paying cash for a down payment, I also am going to have closing costs. And closing costs are just the fees, maybe some charges that are associated with purchasing a property. So at the end, I have signed all the paperwork. I am ready to take ownership of this house. I am going to have to pay some closing costs. It's a pretty small percentage, 1 to 4% of the original purchase price. But obviously, the more expensive the house is, the more expensive those closing costs are going to be. So 1% of a house that is $100,000 is far less than 1% of a house that is $500,000. So your closing cost is going to fluctuate based on how expensive the house you're choosing to purchase is. The payment that you would make every month, rather than making a rent payment, you would be paying what we call a mortgage. And a mortgage is just a payment to pay off that loan that you used to purchase the house. So my bank offered me a home loan, and I'm going to make mortgage payments back to the bank until I have fully paid off the loan and the house is truly mine. And so the mortgage payments are going to include a variety of things. They're going to include the original cost of the home. They're going to include interest because, again, this is a type of credit, and anytime we have credit, we have interest associated with it. It's going to include funds that we need to pay property taxes. And it's going to include funds to pay homeowners insurance. A lot of times, your homeowners insurance is going to be bundled in with your mortgage, whereas your renter's insurance was in addition to your monthly rent. So keep that in mind, that in a mortgage, it is oftentimes going to be included with your homeowners insurance. So while we had 4 main home or renting expenses, we have a few more in home ownership. So in addition to our mortgage, which is our monthly payment, we are still going to have to pay our utilities. If you own a home, there is no way for your utilities to be bundled in with your mortgage payment, like your utilities might be bundled in with your rent. You're still going to have to pay for furniture. You might have to pay for some special assessments. So for example, you have to pay for your house to get inspected whenever you purchase it because you are now the owner. You might have to pay to have a chimney cleaned or assessed. You might have, if you have some special items or special features like that in your house, you might have to pay for special treatments, for special assessments every few years. Again, you're going to have your communications, which most people will bundle in with their utilities. We are going to have maintenance and repairs. You no longer have a landlord, so if anything happens to your house, you are fully responsible for your repairs and for fixing it. And then if you choose to live in a neighborhood that offers amenities like a pool, something like a clubhouse, something like that, you might have to pay what we call homeowners association dues. That oftentimes only comes up if you are living in a neighborhood. If you don't live in a neighborhood that offers any amenities, then you probably do not pay homeowners association dues. So a couple more expenses then came along with renting. So we're going to look at a couple scenarios. If I want to buy a house that is $250,000, we're going to look at some examples for different interest rates and different credit scores. Different down payments and different credit scores. So if I have my down payment between these two are going to be different. So I could make the full 20% down payment if I have $50,000 cash. So I have $50,000 cash. I'm going to pay just under $1,200 every month for my mortgage. So in order to, with a 30-year loan, that's standard, is a 30-year loan, in order to fully pay for my $250,000 home, it will cost me $417,000 instead. So I'm not quite paying $200,000 more because I have to take out a home loan. But we can see how that number dramatically changes if I only have a 5% down payment. I don't have the full 20%. So because I have a 5% down payment, they're going to charge me mortgage insurance. And that mortgage insurance is going to be almost $9,000. My mortgage payment is a little bit higher. And so in the end, I'm paying over $60,000 more for the same house because I was unable to save up a high enough down payment. And then my second scenario, I have the same down payment, but my credit is different. So we can see that because I have a higher credit score, 780 versus 720, both very good credit scores, but 780 is higher, so I have a lower interest rate compared to 3.5%. My monthly mortgage is a little bit cheaper, and so in total, I'm going to save about $6,000 between my two, just because my credit score was 60 points higher. And 60 points is not that much in a credit score. So if we think about this, if 780 was compared to maybe 600 or 520, something like that, they would be, I would be paying far, far more. So the lower your credit score, the more you're going to be paying in total on your home loan. Alrighty, and we said that our lender is going to look at some of our financial documents, like our our statement of financial position. So they're going to look at what we call our equity, And our equity is just any monetary value of our property minus what we owe on it. So the longer you have been paying on a home that you own, the higher your equity is going to be because you have more ownership in it. You don't owe as much money. And so whenever we have this statement of financial position, we're going to be looking at some benefits to owning. So some benefits are that you are going to have pride in your ownership. You're going to be able to customize your house however you want. You can paint it however you want. You can make modifications. You're going to get tax benefits for owning a home. You get no tax benefits for renting. And then you have that opportunity to build that equity. So the longer you own your home, the more equity you have. Some risks to ownership is that you may have unanticipated expenses. Your washer and dryer may break. You may accidentally have a flood. A tornado may come and tear your house down. Those are incredibly unexpected expenses that you might be responsible for. The property of your value may decrease over time if you are not taking care of your home, if you are not maintaining it, and if you're letting things go wrong, if you're letting things fall apart. It is possible that you may decrease in value. And at some point, depending on how the economy is going at the time, it may be very difficult for you to sell your home. So we're going to skip through this activity for our virtual note guide. And that is where we will end. We will pick back up here later with transportation options.